So in Sports Central, we'll be going over our SEC quarterback rankings for the 2020 season, and as you know, we're already in late May, and we're getting pretty close to the kickoff of the season, only a couple months away now. But yeah, as you know, we're going to be going over more in depth into many more players, and that's what we're going to be doing in this series. We're going to be going over rankings on several positions for each conference, and yeah, this is going to be the first one, the SEC quarterbacks. We're going to be going over all 14 projected starting quarterbacks in this conference for the upcoming season. So yeah, these are primarily based off of stats from the previous seasons that these guys have played, as well as how I expect them to do in general, and also the talent around them. And yeah, with that being said, let's look at your number 14, and that's going to be Vanderbilt's Ken Seals. And the quarterback situation is still very uncertain for this team. I mean, like, I'm actually projecting a recruit to be their starting quarterback, which, yeah, he hasn't even played in college yet. He's actually a 3-star quarterback out of Weatherford, Texas, and yeah, his 24/7 composite score is 0.878. So yeah, he looks like he's going to be a great quarterback. I expect him to do a decent job. I mean, once again, it's still very uncertain for Vanderbilt, and that's primarily the reason why they ended up getting placed at number 14, is because, I mean, they got a very uncertain quarterback situation. And yeah, honestly, I've looked at several websites kind of projecting which quarterback will be the starting one for Vanderbilt, because I'm not quite sure on that yet. I mean, their stats weren't very good at the quarterback position even last year, and they're also losing a couple people. But yeah, and Ken Seals, it seems to be the favorite as for the starting position goes. So it seems like he will be the starting quarterback come week 1. Once again, that can change. We're still a couple months away, but yeah, Ken Seals does look like he's going to be a starting quarterback, and if he is, I do expect him to quite possibly be kind of towards the bottom end of quarterbacks. Once again, when you have a 3-star quarterback at your starting position in the SEC, it might not turn out very well. I mean, I'm just saying the facts, because 3-star quarterbacks aren't the best of the best. But yeah, with that being said, let's look at your number 13, and that's going to be Missouri's SHAWN. And yeah, he played for TCU between 2017 and 18. He actually didn't take a snap for Missouri in the 2019 season. He had to sit out. The NCAA, I think, required him to because he was transferring away from TCU. So yeah, he hasn't really played a game since 2018. So that's a little bit of a concern for me in general, just because he hasn't had an extra year of experience, and he's had to be sat out, of course. But yeah, he's played in 12 total games over 2 seasons. And the quarterback situation is still very uncertain for Missouri as well. That's another reason why Missouri gets landed so far down, is because, I mean, this quarterback situation is still very uncertain. I'm sure they're going to split up the time between a couple of quarterbacks at least. I don't expect them to go 100% on SHAWN Roberts. I'd be really shocked if they did that. But his 2018 stats, they weren't terrible, but they definitely weren't good. He had over 1,300 yards with 9 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. So yeah, he basically had a 1-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, which is really not that good. He had a 60.8% completion, which that isn't all that terrible as well. But you got to consider that he only put up 1,300 yards in 2018. So yeah, SHAWN Robinson, I do expect to be a decent quarterback. I'm not expecting anything big from him, though, and that's the main reason why he's at number 13. Moving on to number 12, we got Ole Miss's John Rhys Plumlee. He played 9 games in the 2019 season, and he actually had more rushing yards than passing yards in 2019. He split some time with a different quarterback, and he's a very good rusher, no doubt on that. He's also an average passer, which is the problem for me in going into 2020. And I've seen some lists where John Rhys Plumlee is actually quite much higher than this. I mean, he's in the top 10, I'm sure, in most other lists of quarterback rankings for the SEC. But yeah, his 2019 stats, not all that terrible. 910 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. So once again, his passing rating is not very good at all. He also has a 52.7% completion rate, which I think that's the worst that we're going to see on this list. As far as rushing yards go, very good. He had over 1,000 rushing yards last season with 12 touchdowns and a 6.6 yard average. So yeah, once again, Plumlee, I do expect to be a decent quarterback. He definitely will be a major rushing quarterback. I mean, he'll be kind of similar to what we've seen in past years. For example, with Lynn Bowden of Kentucky, that would be a great example of last season because he was a major rusher. I mean, he had to take over because Terry Wilson was injured. And so, I mean, yeah, I think that may be the same situation that we may see with John Plumlee going into 2020. Number 11, we got Ryan HILINSKI from South Carolina, and he had a decent 2019 season passing-wise. He's definitely not a rushing quarterback, though. I think he had like negative 50 yards of rushing last season. But of course, once again, he's not a rushing quarterback, but just an interesting stat there. But yeah, Mike Bobo taking over as offensive coordinator certainly will make a big change in this South Carolina offense next season. And will it help? Ryan HILINSKI is the big question there. I certainly think it will. I mean, of course, Mike Bobo having been the Colorado State head coach previously, I think that's going to help this team a ton. I think it'll help Ryan HILINSKI in general. His 2019 stats: 2,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. He also had a 58.1% completion rate. So yeah, he had a decent season. I mean, not a terrible one at all, but yeah, he definitely needs to lower that interception rate. Of course, he's got basically a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, and considering he only put up 11 touchdowns, that's not all that great. But yeah, Ryan HILINSKI definitely, I think, will be a quarterback that has a lot of room to improve in 2020. I mean, the big downside of him is that he's not a rushing quarterback, though, once again. I mean, we've seen that more and more as years have gone on. I mean, we've seen more and more rushing quarterbacks, and I'm pretty sure within a few years that's going to be the only quarterback we're going to see, because, I mean, kind of just the quarterbacks kind of like Ryan HILINSKI aren't working as well in most offenses now, and it just doesn't work as well in general. And considering the numbers of rushing quarterbacks are pretty high right now, it's going to be tough for Ryan HILINSKI to be able to deal with that. And of course, once again, that's still up for question at this point in time. But as far as his passing goes, he's decent. I definitely think he can improve, though, which I do expect him to in the 2020 season, no doubt on that. Moving on to number 10, we got LSU's Myles Brennan. This was a tough one to rank right here. I considered putting him much lower just because he has literally no experience, and I considered putting him much higher because of Joe Burrow. I mean, he was right behind Joe Burrow for a good couple of years, and so yeah, he's got major shoes to fill. I mean, when you're having to precede a quarterback that basically put up one of the best career stats in college football history. I mean, Joe Burrow was in the SEC, probably the toughest conference at all of college football, and he put up nearly 6,000 total yards of offense along with 60 touchdowns. I mean, that's absolutely insane, and for Myles Brennan to have to follow up with him, that's going to be tough for him to deal with. I'm sure he's got a ton of pressure on him right now, and certainly that's going to help him, I think. That's going to help him be a great quarterback, is because he's going to be very pressured to do good, but he does have a lot of great talent around him that's going to help a ton. But once again, he's got literally nothing as far as experience goes. I mean, in 2019, he played a little bit, 353 yards of offense along with a touchdown and interception, and a 60% completion rate as well. So yeah, he did play limited time in 2019 just behind Joe Burrow, but yeah, either way though, Myles Brennan, I do expect to be a good quarterback. I mean, honestly, the only thing that Myles Brennan can do for me is surprise. Like, no matter how he does, he's just going to surprise me. I mean, it would not surprise me a single bit, or it would surprise me, but it wouldn't if Myles Brennan went all the way and was the top 6 quarterback in the SEC. But it also wouldn't surprise me if he was a major bust, because one, we haven't hardly even seen him at all. I mean, yeah, he's a quarterback that really does not have much experience at all. So yeah, for Myles Brennan, I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see how he does. I'm really looking forward to seeing how Myles Brennan this offense does. I do expect them to be good. I don't expect Myles Brennan to be a bust by any means, but it's kind of a toss up in the air for me where Myles Brennan is going to rank in the SEC going into 2020, because I mean, we don't really have much. I mean, he doesn't have much experience. I mean, it's really tough to say whether or not he's going to be an elite quarterback or not, just like Joe Burrow was. Moving in. At number 9, we got JARRETT from Tennessee, and he's going to have a lot of competition for the starting position this season. I mean, yeah, that's certainly set in stone right now, but yeah, I think this is the last quarterback on this list that I'm pretty uncertain about. Of course, he's a great quarterback. I do believe that. I think he's got a ton of potential to stun a lot of people in 2020. But the big thing is that he still's got a lot of room for improvement. He's got a lot of talent around him as well. I mean, Jeremy Pruitt has done a really good job in Tennessee, in my opinion. I expect Tennessee to actually be one of the bigger dark horses in the SEC going into 2020. No one's really talking about them, but I do expect Tennessee to quite possibly be a contender to make a pretty big run at their division. And yeah, JARRETT, it kind of starts with him. Of course, the quarterback position is pretty good in Tennessee. They got a couple of really good quarterbacks in there, and yeah, JARRETT, it looks like he's going to be the starter right now, but he's definitely got to step up his game if he's going to remain the starting quarterback for Tennessee. And yeah, honestly, if he's given the chance, he's definitely going to improve, in my opinion. I mean, his stats already were pretty good last season. I mean, he had over 2,100 yards, nearly 2,200, along with 16 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. So he needs to lower his interception rate a bit. His completion's pretty decent, 59.1%, which is nothing crazy, but it's definitely nothing bad at all. But yeah, JARRETT, number 9 on this list, pretty much the last quarterback that's on this list that I'm still kind of concerned about. Number 8, is going to be Kentucky, Terry Wilson, and he was injured for the majority of 2019. We hardly saw him. Of course, Lynn Bowden was the starting quarterback for the majority of the season, and he had a good 2018 season as well. I mean, he had a decent stat rate. Of course, he had 1,800 yards with 11 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. And yeah, overall, I mean, he does also need to lower his interception rate, but I do expect Terry Wilson to definitely have a good shot at the quarterback position. The big question for him, I mean, he had a pretty bad injury is whether or not he can stay healthy going into 2019. Of course, when you lose an entire season, it's really tough to get back on track. And yeah, for Terry Wilson, I do expect him. I mean, he's going to have a good shot, but the big question here is going to be whether or not he can stay healthy, which he's got lots of potential around him to. I mean, for Kentucky is definitely a team as well. They're kind of like Tennessee in that factor where not really anyone's talking about them, but they definitely could be a good team. Like, I'm not expecting anything crazy like how they were in 2018. I mean, this team was definitely one of the best teams that they've had in a long time back in 2018. But yeah, for Terry Wilson, I mean, he's a good quarterback in my opinion. Once again, if he can just lower his interception rate, that's going to be huge. But his completion rate's really good, 67.2% in 2018. So yeah, that's one of the better ones in the SEC, I do believe. But yeah, once again, the big question for him is whether or not he can stay healthy. Moving on to number 7, we got Arkansas's Felipe Franks. And Franks actually transferred in from Florida. He was the projected starting quarterback, or he was the starting quarterback for the first game of the season for Florida last season. And yeah, he looked like I actually expected him to be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC last season. Of course, he was a little bit inconsistent down in Florida, but yeah, transferring to Arkansas, this could be a great move for him, no doubt. I mean, 2017 and 2018 were great seasons for him. I mean, in 2018, he had a great touchdown interception ratio. He had a 4-to-1, which that's the best on this list that we've seen so far. He had right around 2,500 yards. Once again, 24 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and his completion was okay, pretty decent. 58.4% is what he had. And yeah, I definitely think Felipe Franks, if he can stay healthy, once again, he's kind of in the same situation as Terry Wilson is in that factor, is whether or not he can stay healthy. I mean, if he can stay healthy, I definitely think he could be a top 5 SEC quarterback. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But the offensive line could be an issue for Arkansas. Of course, I mean, they haven't had a good offensive line in a while, and this team was one that really struggled in that position this past season. So yeah, Felipe Franks, definitely, if he can handle a bad offensive line, I think he could have potential to really surprise a lot of people going into 2020. And this is one of the main quarterbacks where I'm actually really interested in seeing how he does. Of course, he's a pretty big toss-up for me right now in Felipe Franks. Moving on to number 6, and this is where the quarterbacks really start to get good. We got Bo Nix from Auburn. He's a true freshman in 2019, and he's got a ton of potential. I mean, yeah, Bo Nix is definitely a player that I could see possibly being the next Joe Burrow within a couple of years. I mean, for him to, I mean, he's definitely got the ability to be a top 4 SEC quarterback. He's got lots of great talent around him, great offensive line. His 2019 stats, 2,500 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. So his yardage was kind of low. His completion is a little bit low as well with 57.6%. But I definitely think that Bo Nix, I mean, he's definitely got potential to be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. And once again, he was a true freshman last season, so he's got plenty of years ahead of him still. And yeah, I mean, honestly, it's going to be really interesting to see how much he's able to improve in 2020. I definitely think, once again, if he can stay healthy, I think Bo Nix definitely is a player that you need to watch out for in the SEC. Moving on to number 5, we got Alabama's Mac Jones, and this is really where the rankings really started to get tough for me. I mean, this top 5 could really go in any order, but number 5, it just happened to be Alabama's Mac Jones. He took over in 2019 after Tua got injured. And the main reason why I don't have him any higher than this is because he doesn't have a whole lot of experience. I mean, he's got a lot of promising experience. I mean, look at his stats from last season. He had over 1,500 yards with 14 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Great touchdown interception ratio, especially for a quarterback that doesn't have much of experience. And his completion was excellent too. If you round up that 69%, 68.8% was his exact completion rate. So, yeah, Mac Jones, I definitely think is a quarterback to watch out for in the SEC next season. I mean, Alabama's definitely a team that has produced a lot of great quarterbacks in the past. I mean, Tua is a great example of that over the past few seasons. And yeah, Mac Jones looks like he's going to be able to do kind of the same thing that Tua was able to do. It just is a matter of whether or not he can get up to that level. But yeah, he was excellent the time he played last season. I mean, Alabama was definitely a team that still was a major contender going in towards the rest of the season. I mean, he got a good bowl win against Michigan as well. So yeah, I definitely think Mac Jones is a quarterback that definitely should lead Alabama to a great season once again in 2020. It wouldn't surprise me a single bit if he ended up surprising a lot of people. I'm not expecting him to be the next Joe Burrow by any means, but I do expect Mac Jones to definitely contend with some of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. Moving on to number 4, we got Texas A&M's Kellen Mond, and I've seen a lot of lists where they actually have Kellen Mond at number 1, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put him at number 4, actually. I mean, he's had a lot of great seasons, especially between 2018 and 2019, and I definitely think he has potential to be the next Joe Burrow of the SEC in 2020. I mean, if you look back to how Joe Burrow did in 2018, I mean, his stats were okay. they were nothing crazy, but they were really similar to how Kellen Mond was this past season in 2019. So yeah, I think he definitely has potential to do that, especially with Texas A&M being a team that I do expect to be one of the better teams in the SEC next season. Yeah, his 2019 stats, 2,800 yards, nearly 2,900, along with 20 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. So his interception rate's a little high. That's what kind of concerned me a little bit. But his completion percentage is pretty good, 61.6%. His stats were actually better in 2018, which was a bit of a surprise for me. But still, man, that just shows the potential that he has. He had over 3,100 yards with 24 touchdowns and 9 interceptions back in 2018. So yeah, Kellen Mond is definitely a quarterback that I could definitely see being the best quarterback in the SEC if his team warrants that. But I definitely think Texas A&M is a team that you got to watch out for as well in the SEC going into 2020. I mean, not a lot of people are talking about them. I mean, if Texas A&M didn't have as brutal of a schedule as they did last season, I mean, in my opinion, they had the second toughest schedule in 2019 out of any team. If they didn't have that tough of a schedule, I definitely could have seen Texas A&M being a team that could have made it all the way to the SEC championship, quite possibly. And I mean, yeah, I think that they've got a lot of potential for that in 2020. But yeah, it just kind of depends on Kellen Mond and how he does, which I do expect him to be a good quarterback. It wouldn't surprise me to see him get above 3,000 yards this upcoming season, and as a matter of fact. But once again, you do have to lower that interception rate. If he could do that, that'd be huge. Okay, moving on to number 3, we got Jamie Newman. And we got a couple of transfer quarterbacks at the top of this list. And I mean, I got some good reasons why. I'll go over that in a sec. But yeah, Jamie Newman transferred in from Wake Forest. He was able to work really well with a team that doesn't have much talent. I mean, Wake Forest is one of those teams that really does not do well in recruiting. And so for Jamie Newman to perform as well as he did at Wake Forest, it was really something that was very, very surprising to me. Of course, his 2019 stats were really good. 2,900 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. So yeah, his interception rate was okay. I mean, he definitely could improve it, but his completion was pretty good too. 60.9% is where he landed. So, and yeah, Jamie Newman, I definitely think, he was a top 3 quarterback in the ACC last season. I believe the only quarterbacks ahead of Jamie Newman last season would include Bryce Perkins from Virginia, and of course, you got to include Trevor Lawrence from Clemson. So, yeah, Jamie Newman was a great quarterback in the ACC, and I definitely expect that to transfer over to the SEC. He's got a ton of room for improvement. And considering he's going to be working around a lot more talent in the 2020 season as he did in 2019, I think Jamie Newman could be a player that definitely could break out in the 2020 season. I mean, I could see this quarterback getting above 3,500 yards if his offensive line works well, for one, and for two, he can stay healthy, which he really hasn't been very injury prone, so that's going to be good. But yeah. Next up at number 2, we got Kyle Trask from Florida, and this is a big surprise for me this past season. Of course, he took over after Felipe Franks got injured for Florida last season, and Felipe Franks was actually expected to be the starting quarterback for the majority of the season for this team, and yeah, he definitely surprised a lot of people, including me. He actually still has a ton of potential too. I mean, if you look at his stats, 2,900 yards, nearly 3,000 for that matter, along with 25 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, and you also got to include that he actually missed a game, so he wasn't really all that involved in their first game of the season. So yeah, it certainly should be interesting. It should be interesting to see how he does in 2020. I do expect him to be probably one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC, no doubt. It would not surprise me a single bit to see him actually be the best quarterback in the SEC. I mean, for him to perform as well as he did in his first year starting his action, I mean, yeah, 66.9% completion as well. Very accurate quarterback. I mean, I think he had the best completion rate in the entire SEC last season. Don't quote me on that, but it definitely seems like that on this list so far. But yeah, Kyle Trask definitely is a quarterback you got to watch out for. And yeah, once again, I mean, for him to put up the stats that he did last season, considering last season was his first full season of action, definitely is something to watch out for going into 2020. And your number 1 is going to be KJ Costello. You just can't put any other quarterback in this position other than him. I mean, he transferred in from Stanford, and yeah, you got to consider he hasn't worked with squat in Stanford the past couple of seasons. I mean, yeah, he hasn't had a good offense at all to work with, and if he's healthy, he can definitely be a top-tier quarterback. I'm talking, I mean, he could be one of the better quarterbacks in the nation next season. I mean, looking at his career stats, I mean, he had a decent team to work with in 2018. As you know, I mean, he put up over 3,500 yards of offense with 29 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, 65.1%. And I believe that was, I mean, he didn't have a great offensive line to work with even in that season. So Yeah, considering in 2019, I mean, he was injured for a good chunk of the season, I believe. I mean, he had over 1,000 yards still with 6 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, but I mean, his completion was pretty low too, 61.1%. But I mean, yeah, he just hasn't had much of a team to work with over the past couple seasons, and he's got a ton of potential. So that's why I think it was a great idea for him to transfer away from Stanford. I mean, yeah, I think he's really going to show a lot of teams KJ Costello, he's going to be a quarterback that you got to watch out for in the next season. I mean, he definitely could lead Mississippi State to a pretty good season, in my opinion. I mean, I believe next season will be his last year of action that he's able to do in all of college football. So, yeah, but either way, I do expect KJ Costello to be a great quarterback. If he can stay healthy, I mean, you could expect over 3,000 yards again from him, I do expect. I mean, I'm pretty confident that he could land 3,000 yards for Mississippi State this upcoming season. But yeah, once again, that about wraps up our SEC quarterback rankings for the 2020 season. And yeah, once again, we're still a couple months away, so this could change as it goes on. Once again, these are just projections as to who the starting quarterbacks will be. And of course, injuries could still happen as well. But yeah, with that being said, that about wraps up this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to slap a like on it, subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel, and I really appreciate that. But once again, thanks all for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.